Good morning. My name is Andrew Ledbetter and I'm one of the officers that advises and supports members of Cheshire Fire Authority. Just before the broadcast began, I checked to make sure that all of the participants in the meeting were connected and able to take part. You may hear us refer to people taking part by phone. That's just our fallback position if things fail with Skype. I've had confirmation that the meeting is being successfully broadcast and that you can hear me through YouTube. And with the help of colleagues, we'll monitor throughout the meeting to make sure that everyone's connected and the broadcast is continuing. The meeting will stop whenever the broadcast stops, and we have had intermittent problems with it during our other meetings. If the meeting stops because of the broadcast, we'll put up a banner to say when we'll rejoin, when we'll restart. The meeting is being conducted in accordance with some rules that were agreed by the Fire Authority remote meeting rules, and you can find those on our website. Whilst it is our intention to have pictures as much as possible, we know that this can cause problems, so sometimes members will not have the cameras on because their broadband connection is not very good. I will now hand over to Councillor Steve Wright, who is the Chair of the Governance and Constitution Committee.
Thank you, Andrew. To those listening and watching our meeting, I'm Councillor Steve Wright and I'm the Chair of the Governance and Constitution Committee. I will now take us through the agenda. For the benefit of anyone listening and watching the meeting, I should mention a few pieces of housekeeping. Members of the committee are all at different locations. Some officers are in one location and, as you heard, intend to make sure that members stay connected to the meeting and that it continues to be broadcast. If a member is disconnected from the meeting, then the meeting will be paused for a short time to allow the connection to be re-established. However, the meeting can continue even if not all members are connected. provided that certain rules aren't breached. Members who lose their video connection are able to join the meeting by phone. Because I'm not in the same room as the officers, I will from time to time ask them to confirm things to me, such as which members have indicated that they wish to speak on an item and whether everyone remains connected to the meeting. Officers and members should make sure that they use their name before speaking so that people know who is saying what. Officers and members should also make it clear which page, paragraph, etc. they are concerned with if they are referring to a document. We will do our best to make the meeting as easy to follow as possible. You will find it much easier to understand if you are referring to your agenda pack. Thank you. Item 1A, as we all know, the meeting is being recorded and is being broadcast. Move on to it. Second item 1B, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Just to confirm, on the call today, in the meeting today, we've got Councillors Steve Wright, Rob Polehill, Mike Biggin, David Brown, Martin Delaney, Nick Mannion, and Michael Beanland, who is substituting for Councillor Rachel Bailey. We've also got independent non-elected member Derek Barnett, and Leslie Thompson, the other independent non-elected member, can't make it today. She sent her apologies.
Thank you. Item 1C, this is just to confirm the membership of the committee 2021. We've all got a copy, and we all know who we are, and we're all here. So just note that report. If somebody would move that, please.
I'll move that, Steve. Councillor Mike Biggin.
Thank you, Mike. Seconder.
Second, Chair, Martin Delaney.
I'll just wait to see if anybody wishes to say anything. If not, we'll note that report. Nobody wishes to speak. Okay, report noted. Thank you. Move on to item 1D, declaration of members' interest. Can members please indicate whether they have any declarations of interest to make in respect of any of the items on the agenda? Have any members indicated that they wish to speak?
No, they've not. So no one's indicated.
Okay, thank you. Move on to item 1E, the minutes of the Governance and Constitution Committee.
I'm removed, Chair.
Thank you. Just got that many papers on my desk. It's incredible. We have a seconder for those, please. They were Wednesday, 29th of July, 2020. We have a seconder with those as an accurate record.
Yes, Chair, Martin Delaney, second.
Thank you. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Yes, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, I take it these are confirmed as a correct record and that I may add my signatures to them. Okay. Move on to item 2. Items for discussion. Item 2, dispensations. This is to move item 2, dispensations, pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack. And Andrew Ledbetter will present this item. Andrew, please.
So I think the report speaks for itself. It simply asks you to extend the dispensations to Councillor Holbrook, and I've not really anything to add.
Is that agreed?
Rob agreed, Chair. Although I agree that, Chair. Move.
Agreed.
Agreed.
That's agreed. Thank you very much. So we're happy to approve the extension of dispensations to Councillor Jill Holbrook. Thank you. Item 3, Whistleblowing Annual Report 2009-20. Pages 11 to 12 in your pack. And I'll ask Andrew Ledbetter just to present for a moment on that matter.
So this report details, as it does every year, any whistleblowing activity. So we've got a whistleblowing policy and procedure, and we report to you about any whistleblowing activity during the year. However, this year you will see that there have been no cases at all, so I don't really have anything to add.
Thank you. Just remind everybody, if you do wish to speak, yes, I've got Nick Mann wishes to speak there. Just use the chat function. Nick, please.
Yes, Nick Mannion here. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose that we accept the recommendation, but perhaps Andrew could just explain how regularly we inform people of the whistleblowing facility. Again, the fact the phone hasn't rung for a year, you could view that as good news, but again, we want to make sure that people, especially new people joining the organisation, or people who have perhaps been out working remotely during the lockdown, we refresh our comms on this to make sure people know of its availability. But notwithstanding that, I'm happy to propose we accept the recommendation, Chair.
Andrew, could you just give a little brief overview of how people can?
Yes, I will.
Yep.
So yes, we've had this question before, and it's a good point. So I remember one of the meetings a couple of years ago, maybe longer, because my memory's not great. We went and got one of the posters out of, I think it was up in one of the gents' loo or somewhere. So Safe Call is advertised around the buildings. So the Safe Call number appears around the buildings. Now, clearly, if people aren't in the buildings, the question is, do they know about it? Well, they should know about it because it is publicised. But it's an interesting point now because obviously we've got COVID and we've got this idea of these buildings being COVID secure so we can use them. What we've decided is that we will have people tell us about any breaches of our COVID arrangements by using the Safe Call number. So we have, if you like, refreshed and reminded people about that possibility. So I think we probably do as well as we can in advertising it. You would hope that the Safe Call number is the last resort anyway, so it isn't the only way that people can complain or raise concerns. They should be able to speak to senior people. In fact, they should be able to speak to you as members of the Governance and Constitution Committee. But it's a good point, and I will go away and just double check just how prominent it is at the moment. I'm well aware of it, and I think a number of people will be, but I will double check again.
Any other members wish to speak on that?
No one else has indicated no.
Okay, so we've got it moved by Nick and seconder.
Happy to second, Chair. Martin Delaney.
Thank you, Martin. I'll wait 10 seconds if anybody else wishes to comment. If not, we'll take that as agreed. Okay, that's agreed. Thank you. Could you just remind members if they're not actually on speaking, could they mute the microphone, please? There's going to be a background noise from somewhere. Okay, thank you. Move on to item 4, Compliment and Complaints Annual Report 2019-20, pages 13 to 23 in your pack. I'll ask Andrew just to take us through, and then members can ask any questions at his finish. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check a second? I think someone's just dropped out the call. Just bear with me a second. We've just noticed that Councillor Brown's dropped out the call. Just bear with us for a minute while we check, please. We're just going to ring him. Can I suggest we could just give it 2 minutes while we just check with him? It's early in the meeting and we should try and have everyone connected if possible. We'll ask him to join by phone and hopefully that'll be more stable than his connection at home. So if you just give us 2 minutes, just turn your microphones and your cameras off and relax, please. Right, so we've checked and tried to establish a connection with Councillor Brown and we've left a voicemail for him. I think on the basis that he knows there's a phone number he can utilise, I think it's reasonable for us to continue. Do you agree, Councillor Wright?
I think if everyone's happy with that, we'll continue.
Agree.
Okay.
Agree.
Okay, let's continue. So we're on item 4. We're on page 13 of the agenda. So this is the usual format, the reports, the usual format that you get each year. We've got slightly more complaints than we've had previous years. I don't think there's anything too concerning about that. The numbers have fluctuated previously. We've got the usual level of compliments, and you have some detail in the appendices. You will have noticed that I am sat on my own today. I do have some colleagues here from my team, but I am rather lonely. I will do my best to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, any questions on the compliments and complaints annual report?
Chair,
Rob, yes, Councillor Paul.
Rob Powell. Chair, just a comment really that I think over the last few months while this lockdown has been happening, I think the fire service have excelled with them, with everybody. Many people you speak to us, but certainly in the voluntary sector, have paid great respect to them. You know what I mean? They've really stepped up. And don't forget, we've had people who've retired, come back, stepped up to the mark, and really showed us the way on this one. So I think we should record our thanks to all the service people for this, and behind the office as well, office staff, because they've done a tremendous job, every one of them. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree there, Rob. I think we've got some more speakers there, Andrew.
Yes, Councillor Mannion and then Councillor Delaney.
Councillor Mannion.
Yeah, I'd just like to, Councillor Mannion here, 100% endorse what Councillor Powell said. It's just an observation. The fact that we've had slightly more complaints, I don't see as a negative. I think people will complain if they think they're going to get listened to. And it was an interesting read because there's obviously a story behind a lot of these complaints that one can only speculate from the brief details in the appendix. But they are extremely varied, to say the least. But what is good is they're all investigated and feedback's given to the complainant. But again, I don't see it as a negative that we receive complaints. In fact, it's a positive because if we have got something wrong, it's an opportunity to learn from the process and put things right. So, and again, I'd like to 100% endorse what Councillor Paul said about our staff's activities during the lockdown, during the pandemic. It's been absolutely peerless, and I'd like to pass on my thanks too.
Thank you, Councillor Mannion. Councillor Delaney.
Thank you, Chairman. Hang on. Trying to get the. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Martin Delaney, just fully endorse what both Councillor Polo and Councillor Mannion said. I think it can be recently referenced in the email I sent to the Chief Fire Officer, which was published in one of the recent publications. But going back to the compliments, I don't think what's published here does it justice, if you know what I mean. Many times I get compliments to be passed on, which wouldn't be recorded here. So it's, I just say they're doing a superb job.
Thank you, Councillor Delaney. Yeah, I think they have done and that they continue to do so under trying conditions. So we should pass our thanks to them from this committee. Yeah. Anybody else, Andrew, that wishes to?
No one else has indicated. Can I just make one comment before we finish
Yeah.
on this item? It's just that my main concern would be if we had lots of formal complaints. So I think when Councillor Mannion was saying it's not a bad thing to have complaints, I think he's right. I think that, if something's bothering someone, they should be able to raise it. The best thing about the process that we got at the moment is that by and large, most of those things are resolved very quickly. They're nipped in the bud. Someone will go and speak to someone quite regularly. It's often done in person, clearly more difficult at the moment, but it's often done in person. And I think that you would be worried if the formal complaints were going up. And they're not. They're fairly steady, and they are often ones that are, you kind of recognise as areas that it would be very difficult to satisfy some of the people that are involved in it. I think we go a long way further than some of the organisations I've worked for in trying to explain why we've done something, why the issues arisen. And I think it's for that reason that we have such a low level of formal complaints. So, and they take time up, so the best thing in the world is to get these things done and dealt with as quickly as possible. And if they're not formal, they're dealt with much quicker with much less officer time. So I think the report is a good news report.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So we've considered the information about that's the next one. Yeah, so that's okay. Everybody happy with that? Not the report. Thanks.
Agreed.
Agree.
Send our thanks to all the staff and everybody who's been working so hard, especially during this pandemic. I've had my remarks to those of Rob, Martin, and everybody. Thank you. Item 5, summary of member attendance. You've got copies of this. It's pages 25 to 29. Again, this shows the work that the members actually do in supporting the fire authority and supporting the fire service in their work. So, Andrew, would you like to present that, please?
Yes, so again, this is the usual format. I think it's probably self-explanatory, really. The only difference, I think, this year, we've just put a note in where members have acted as substitutes. So it was something that didn't used to happen very often at all. We didn't even have provision for it in the original constitution when I arrived. And it was put in there some years ago, and we now use it. So I suppose what that tells you is if a member can't make it, they will nowadays arrange for a substitute, as Councillor Bailey has today. So I think it's relevant when you're looking at the statistics. I haven't really got anything to add to the report. I mean, I suppose the question is, do the guidelines that you originally agreed quite some time ago still appear to be valid? And the way that they're described, and is there anything else that you wish to do at this point?
I'm happy to support the guidelines as they are. Does anybody wish to comment?
Just move the report, Councillor Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Second.
For the report, Chair.
So you've got a couple of speakers. You've got Councillor Beanland and I think
Okay.
Councillor Brown maybe. He's just typing something. Councillor Beanland, I think.
Just a quick question, Andrew. If a member is ill, do they get any kind of special exemption, or is that just marked down as an absence?
Well, it is just marked down as an absence. So in the past, if we've had anyone whose statistics are looking a bit low, we will tend to talk to them and say to them, is there anything that you wish us to bring to the attention of the committee? If you'll remember, well, actually you won't necessarily because you wouldn't have been involved, but when we're looking at Leslie Thompson's term being extended, she'd been absent from a few meetings, and we knew that it was due to illness, and we knew some of the reasons for it, and we commented on that in the report. I think the idea of this isn't to sort of point the finger at anyone. The idea is just to make sure that we're satisfied that members are doing what they can. We know that they've got other jobs. We know that they've got a lot of work to do in their own constituent authorities. And by and large, this is just a quick update. If someone was very low, then as the guidelines suggest, we would expect the group leader to talk to them about it and establish whether it was still appropriate for them to work on the fire authority because maybe they didn't have sufficient time for it. That's it really. It's not meant to be pejorative, the report. It's meant to just explain where we're at.
That's fine.
Councillor David Brown has indicated as well.
David Brown, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a quick question. When we're talking about substitutes, if you arrange a substitute, are you then clocked as having attended, or are you still marked down for the absence?
You're still marked down for the absence, but I think we'll try and true that up so that it looks a bit clearer next time. It's a bit of a pain actually to try and put this into a nice, neat format, but I think we'll try and do that because I think it does help. So we know that Councillor Rachel Bailey has arranged a substitute in the past. So you know it's just quite tricky to put it into a table and make it look nice and neat. But we'll have a better go at it next year.
Thank you.
Councillor Nick Mannion's indicated, Steve.
Councillor Mannion.
Yeah, picking up on David's point, I think if you're going to struggle to get to a meeting, and say you're away on holiday, that'd be a fine thing at the moment. But say you're going to be away on holiday for a meeting and that's been pre-booked, I think there is an expectation that you, through your own group, would arrange for a substitute for a committee meeting. However, if there's a family issue, I had an issue the other week. My son was involved in a serious road traffic accident. Fortunately, he wasn't injured on the way to work the other morning, and therefore I had to give apologies for a Cheshire East meeting, and there was obviously no time to arrange a substitute. So I think what we need, what we could emphasise is if members know in advance that they're going to be unable to attend a meeting, there is an expectation that they will inform the authority as soon as possible, and the onus is upon them to try and arrange for a substitute, an appropriate substitute to attend the meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, agree. I think that's the way it works now. Whether it's clear in the paperwork how that sort of looks, but that's what happens now, I believe. If you can't attend a meeting, you know, arrange a substitute with one of your fellow councillors. Yep. Any other comments? No? So Rob moved the report. We've got a seconder for that.
Happy to second, Chair. Martin Delaney.
Thank you, Councillor Delaney. I'll wait for any other comment. 10 seconds. If any member disagrees, please speak up now. Okay, I think that's accepted. Thank you. Move on to the next item. Okay, item 6, draft statement of assurance 2019-2020. And this is on pages 31 to 53 of your pack. And I'll ask Andrew to present this item as well. Thank you. Andrew.
Okay, so the document that's attached to the report is in draft. There's a few bits that need to be updated, but it's a requirement of the national framework, and we've been producing one of these for a number of years now. Now, our approach isn't to produce a massive document. We signpost a load of other documents that are on our website, and that means it's quite a live document, really. It can be updated through the year. And obviously it refers to all sorts of things. It will go to the Fire Authority in September for approval because it's one of those significant documents because it is a legal requirement for us to publish it. And it's largely looking back in time, but there are elements that talk about things in the current tense. We've assessed our compliance with the national framework and other documents, and we try and make sure that we include everything in the statements of assurance. I think we capture everything that we need to. Now, just one thing that's mentioned in there, just probably worth talking about. You'll notice there's a reference to the HMI, the inspectorate. Let me just check. It's towards the end. So it talks about the inspectorate on page 53. And they were due to inspect us in March, April 2020 when COVID hit and everything was cancelled. Just to let you know that we're now expecting that to be exactly 12 months late. So we're expecting that to be March, April 2021. We're already starting to gear up for some kind of assurance visit to do with the way that we've dealt with COVID. And we think that all authorities are getting that in the next few months. But the actual proper assessment, the proper assessment by HMI will be next March, April. I'm happy to answer any questions. You've had one indication of a speaker, I think, at the moment. Just bear with me a second.
Yeah, I think I've got Martin. Does Martin, Councillor Delaney?
Yep, Councillor
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just Councillor Martin Delaney. Just one question, and it's probably a simple answer. Page 46, fire prevention, community safety. It's about two-thirds of the way down. It refers to Exeter data, and I just wondered if you can just elaborate what is contained in Exeter data. Can you expand on it, please?
I can't tell you the exact details because I don't know it, but it's to do with health data. So it's I don't know why Exeter. I'm guessing Exeter were involved in it, but I can get you that detail easy enough. But it's health data. So we get health data. We were, I think, at the forefront of arranging that. It's used nationally these days, and it helps us to target the right people for the safe and well visits. So they talk about this forensic way that they analyse who needs to be visited, and they have different layers, platinum, gold, different layers. I can get you some detail on that off one of my colleagues.
That's fine, Andrew. Thank you very much. I'll have a look myself as well, see what I can find out. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak?
No one's indicated.
No one's indicated. Well, we're able to approve the draft statement of assurance and move to the next item. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Right. Start with the Fire Authority in September. Thank you. I've just got extra data up on my other device, which is there. Item 7, allocation of seats on Cheshire Fire Authority. I'd just like to say that I'm a member of Warrington Borough Council who sent this in. There wasn't any reason to declare particular interest, but just to let people know that I am a member of Warrington Borough Council. So move on to our allocation of seats on Cheshire Fire Authority, and it's pages 55 to 57 of your pack. I'll ask Andrew just to give a brief summary of this, and then we can ask some questions.
Okay, let me just give you a bit of background, because I kept the report as simple as I could, but I've also done a bit more work in light of some further information I've had from Warrington Borough Council over the last few days. So just to explain, when I arrived at the Fire Authority, I instigated an annual check of the formula that sets the proportion and therefore the seat allocations for each of the authorities. Paragraph 3 of the report on page 55 sets out the calculation that is required. It uses some fancy words, but basically we get some numbers from each of the authorities about the local government electors, and then we just check those proportions, and then we see how many seats should be allocated in line with those proportions. It's not perfect. It could never be perfect, because you will get some very close tipping points between authorities being allocated a seat or not. It's just the way the maths works. So that's something that we go through every year. If you look at the table on, so paragraph 6 on page 56 gives you a very good example of how very small variances in the number of local government electors can make a change. So there's a very small change really between 2019-20 and 2020-21. You'll see that the percentages have hardly changed, but the seat allocations have had to change as a result of the way those proportions spin out. So there's not much we can do about that, but we've got some commentary from Warrington Borough Council for us to consider. So let me just talk you through a bit more of it. It was in 2010-11 Warrington first went down to 4 seats, and Quack went up, Cheshire West and Chester Council went up from 7 to 8 seats. The same thing happened in 2018-19 and then again this year. So whenever there's been a change before, I write to the monitoring officers of the councils concerned. So in this case, Warrington Borough and Cheshire West and Chester. And I try and do it about a month before at their annual meeting. Theirs is usually before ours, and it gives them time then to, the monitoring officers, to talk to the chief executive, line up the politicians and make sure everything's square. Gives them a bit of time to work through it. Until this year, there's not been a problem with that. And that's great. Usually it's very low key, done in the background, and we just move on with it. Coronavirus has meant that our lives have been a bit different. And this year, as you'll know, local authorities by and large didn't have annual meetings and rolled forward all their appointments, which absolutely made sense. Somewhat perversely, we were asking the councils to do something different with their appointments for Cheshire West and for Warrington, and it was a bit of a nuisance to them, and I understand that. Unfortunately, I don't draft the law and I don't make up the rules, so it wasn't something I could do a great deal about. So Warrington's asked us to review it. You've seen paragraph 9, that's page 56, going over onto page 57, some of the questions or some of the requests they've made. But since the report's been published, they've given us some additional information. And if I just summarise where I think we're at, it might give you a hand in your deliberations. So Warrington's suggested to us that it doesn't feel that the allocation of seats is equitable. And I think what it's pointing out, and if you look at the numbers, go back to paragraph 6 and look at the numbers, it's saying that at the minute, you've got Halton Council with 97,000 local government electors and Warrington with 165,000 electors, yet there's only 1 seat difference, and they think that that doesn't feel proportionate. And I understand what they're saying. They have suggested that if we increase the seat numbers to 25, that could resolve the situation. And that would give you 9 Cheshire East seats, 8 Cheshire West seats, 3 Halton seats, and 5 Warrington seats. That's just one view of it. And I'll talk about that again in a moment if I may. So it isn't a straightforward thing, because maths tends to be a bit less easy to manoeuvre than words, but that's the situation we've got. Paragraph 11 on page 57, we did talk to a number of local authorities, or we asked a number of local authorities whether they did anything different to us, and they don't. So what that leaves us with, I suppose, is a bit of a conundrum. If we were to reconsider the number of seats on the authority every year, just to make sure that we could get the proportions as right as possible, that would give us a bit of a problem, I think, but it's clearly something that Warrington's encouraged us to think about. Can I ask you, if you are able to, we sent out by email a spreadsheet Are you able to look at that spreadsheet that we sent you? If you're not, it doesn't matter. We don't need to deal with it right now. Are members able to access that spreadsheet that we sent you recently?
Yes, I've got it.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Okay.
Well, let me just very briefly talk about it. I don't need to go into any detail. What the spreadsheet does, it gives you obviously a completely different view of what could happen. So instead of going up to 25, you could reduce the number of seats, and that would still give you a better, potentially a better view of those proportions. So the difficulty with that, at some point, people lose seats, don't they? At some point, everyone loses some seats. The 23 figure hasn't changed since local government reorganisation in 2009. Quite how scientific that figure was at the time, I've no idea. I wasn't involved in coming up with that figure, but clearly the county council went. You got the new authorities of East and West, who both got 8 seats at that time, and since then we haven't changed that. We know that there's quite a bit of pressure within the system for a reduction in the number of members on fire authorities, and we know that at least a couple of fire authorities have gone down to 10, I think it is, and 12 from around the same number as us. So we would certainly be bucking the trend if we increased our numbers. However, that is certainly something that we've been asked to think about as part of the review. So I also, the final thing I just want to comment on is I did send you a link or Emily sent you a link to a statement to the House of Commons. And I think it's clear now that there's going to be further consultation about the PCC's role and the potential for the PCC to become a police, fire and crime commissioner.
Jesus.
So I think, it's not hard to see this in that context. I think if we increase numbers, that would certainly be unusual in the current circumstances. And I think that will be a fact that we'll have to consider as part of the review. At this point, all that we're talking about is, what are those things that you would like us to look at? Have you any other ideas that we should put into the review in order to come up with the right answer at the end? And I'll leave it there, Chair. So far, Councillor Beanland has asked. No one's asked to speak at this point.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Does anybody wish to speak? No, I think if we just consider the reports and
Councillor Beanland has asked to speak, Chair.
Oh, right, Councillor Beanland.
Andrew, just a quick question. Where's the 23 come from? It's never changed in a long while, but what is it based on? Well,
I expect it's something done by those clever people in government. Sorry, it sounds slightly facetious. When local government reorganisation took place, I was involved in it. I worked for the county council. I disaggregated staff east and west. It was a tortuous time. There were quite a lot of things that were either missed or done very late. Now, I think the fire authority is one of those things that they did pick up reasonably early on, but there was lots of debate about how the Cheshire County Council seats and how that would work in the future. I'm not sure necessarily there's a massive amount of science between creating a 23-seat fire authority. They clearly wanted to make sure that the authorities with the larger electorate had more seats. Beyond that, I don't know. The one other thing that's been mentioned by Warrington, which actually perhaps is worth mentioning here, is that although the legislation that we've got, the secondary legislation that we've got, talks about local government electors, Warrington has said, could we not consider population instead as a different a driver of that proportion? And whilst I'm not sure I've got a strong view one way or the other, the law would have to be changed to allow that. So in short, the 23, I don't think there's a massive amount of science behind it, Councillor Beanland, but it was just derived in 2008, 2009 on local government reorganisation.
So when you say the law would have to change, is that the national law or just Cheshire East Fire Service law?
Well, the government would have to change the law. It's secondary legislation. It's not something we could change. We can increase and decrease our numbers, no problem at all. But if we wanted to change so that we had we took account of population instead of local government electors, the law would have to change. We can't change that bit of it. What the scheme says to us at the moment, it tries to discourage us going over 25 members the way it's drafted, but it says you can do if you need to. It's really vague. We just know that generally speaking, very few people have gone above 25, and quite a few of them are trying to reduce numbers, and a few of them have managed to do it now. The Fire Authority has talked about that a couple of times since I've been here, but has not gone that far so far. It's stayed at 23.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak?
Yes, Chair.
Is that please? Councillor Mannion.
Councillor Mannion.
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mannion. Yeah. I think I have some sympathy with Rollington's position, because what is clear, and in a previous life I was a local government officer involved in helping to compile electoral registers, and since I've moved over to the dark side, I've noticed that the level of registration on the electoral register, it's certainly in urban areas like where I live, like Macclesfield, the register in the past was comfortably 95% plus of all properties had at least a name on the register for that address. I would suggest that's now somewhere south of that. Now, I'm not going to get into the argument of electoral registration, but it's clear that the number of voters is just one indicator. It's not the number of service users, is it either? It's and we've also got the issue of people who come to live and work in this country now are no longer in the European Union, and will be still obliged to pay tax, but will not be allowed to register to vote in any elections, never mind parliamentary or local government ones. So whilst I have some sympathy, Andrew's point that there is possibly or probably change coming down the track with that link you referred to. My view is, if there's likely to be some significant change within the foreseeable future, I don't see the point of making major surgery now. That might have to be unpicked in the short or medium term future. So my current view is let's leave it, let's answer the queries and leave things as they are. But again, if the government doesn't proceed with its combined police and fire authorities or whatever, I think we do perhaps then need to revisit it in our case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mannion. Anybody else indicated?
Yes, Chair. Martin
Delaney. Councillor Delaney, yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. All I'd add is, if we agree with what Councillor Mannion's just said, that all I would say is, if we do go for a review, that all four authorities are statutory consultees. I'm sure that would be the case.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin.
Yes, it would. It would be the case. I think we would be writing to all the authorities to say, this is the scope of the review. These are the things that we're going to look at. Have you got any other things that you would want to suggest? Without a change in the law, we can't refocus the calculation, but what we can do is look at things like the number of members, but it is tricky, and I think that the spreadsheet shows you how tricky it is to get it right. If you look at those numbers on that spreadsheet, I reckon 19 members is probably the one that gives you the closest to delivering something that looks right. But of course, that's another change that gives you 7624. So that's that's a massive change to where we are at the moment. It doesn't sound much, but it is. So, I suppose I'm a little bit with Councillor Mannion. We'd have to find something pretty compelling to make significant change to what we've got at the moment. And let's get through the review and see where we come out the other end. I think what Warrington suggested to us is quite helpful. And if we get other suggestions from the other monitoring officers or councillors, the one thing I'm not too sure about is where this would land with your authorities when it was raised with them, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Anybody else? Any other? I think for me, the key is that whatever we do, it's communicated correctly, effectively and efficiently to the right people at the local constituent authorities. I think this time has been different because of the coronavirus, so it was a bit of a shock when changes were made, when we'd sort of said that we would stay as we were because of the issue. But I suppose that's what prompted the move from Warrington to ask about this. I think you're right. I think if we just keep it do the review and make sure that the constituent authorities and the leaders of those authorities are kept in touch with what we're looking at, and their views are taken on board. So there's no surprises. I think that's the answer to that one. Any other comments before we move on? Okay, so we've considered the information in the report and we've provided some guidance to our officers, and we'll look to see how that progresses. Okay, thank you. Move on to item 8, Model Code of Conduct, the consultation by Local Government Association. It's pages 59 to 85 in your packs. Want a drink of water, Andrew, before he asks you to speak again? Are you okay?
I think I'll need a lie down after this item, perhaps.
Pass over to Andrew to give us a report about the speech. Come on, Andrew.
So, item 8, as you said, on page 59, this has come out recently suggesting that we should respond to the consultation. So when it arrived, I started doing one of those compare and contrast, have a look at what the model code said and what our code said. But actually, I realised that was probably a bit premature because this isn't a finalised version anyway. So I've stepped away from trying to be clever because there's no point. I think the consultation and the questions is probably clever enough. It's quite lengthy. So I've settled on a very brief report. But I do say in paragraph 5 on page 59, I think it might be quite hard for us to come up with an agreed response to all the questions. So I suppose there's two versions of this. One is we could talk about it for a while. We could try and come up with an agreed response. You could talk about it anyway, just to sort of gauge what people's views were. And you could respond separately, and I could respond separately as well as an officer rather than as yourselves as members. I'm kind of in your hands, really. It is long. I think it's a really quite odd way of phrasing things in parts. So it asks you questions and then asks you things like to what extent you think something's a good, bad or indifferent thing, which is quite unusual language, really. So I'm in your hands. Do you want to spend a bit of time going through it, or do you think it's more productive for you to send separate responses? And I would also send this on to all the other members of the authority. It's up to you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Andrew. I think we did speak about it, didn't we, and how it compared with and contrasted with our model code of conduct that we've already sort of got. So if members wish to speak, I think Rob has indicated. Is that right?
Yeah, Rob Powell, Chair. I think all authorities have had this, and we are certainly looking at it in Halton. It is one of them things that you've got to look at and then probably send your comments in and collate it all at the end. So I would think that it's better we send comments in if we have them.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Anybody? Councillor Brown, is that right, Andrew?
Yep, it is.
Yeah, I think if we're going to debate for a week or two, So we should take it back to the requisite authorities, and everybody has the right to fill in what they want to fill in.
Okay. Any other councillor or anybody else wish to comment or speak?
Chairman Derek Barnett.
Hi, Derek. Yes, come on, Derek.
Yep. I apologise for not using the chat function, but I don't have access to that. My only comment I would make is that the relevance of this code to the fire authority is fairly tenuous, given the amount of times it applies to members of the authority. It is more for local authorities. I would suggest that any member who wishes to respond should do so individually rather than collectively as an authority.
Thank you. Apologies, Derek. I didn't realise you didn't have the chat function. Yes, please do speak up if you've not got the chat function if you wish to speak. Whilst everybody was on video call. Okay. Anybody else?
No one else has indicated, I don't think. No, they've not.
Okay. So we've considered how we wish to respond, I suppose, and it's up to Andrew will put a response together, and we can, as individual councillors, put responses together to send off. So I think that's the way forward. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, yeah.
Agreed.
Thank
Agreed.
you.
Yep.
So we all understand that, yeah. That's very good. Okay. So I think that is the end of my first chairing of a virtual meeting. So I hope I did okay. It's not as straightforward as you might think. It's a bit more complicated, but I've enjoyed it. And thank you to everybody for taking part. It's been really interesting. Don't go, don't leave us. We're just going to close this part of the meeting. We'll take a 5-minute break. And then we'll see you all for a good chat. The meeting now is finished. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.